What happens when one of Europe's largest city councils spends 6 times more than expected on their ERP implementation and fails miserably to the point where they can't use the software? That's what we're going to talk about here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach their third stage of digital transformation success. And Birmingham City Council is one of Europe's largest city councils. And they recently decided that they were going to replace their SAP system with Oracle Fusion. And in that process, they had budgeted 20 million pounds for the implementation. However, they ended up spending about 115 million pounds at the end of the day. Took years longer than expected and still are not able to use the system to this day. In fact, they're not expecting to be able to use the system fully for another 3 years after the implementation. So what I want to do today is talk about why this implementation failed so miserably, and more importantly, discuss what you can do to avoid the same type of failure. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to share a little bit of information about Third Stage Consulting and who we are. Third Stage Consulting Group is an independent technology agnostic provider of consulting services to help clients through their digital transformations. We help with digital strategy and software selection, as well as implementation planning. And during implementation, we provide services related to program management, organizational change, business process improvement, as well as enterprise architecture. These are just some of the services we provide. We have offices in North America as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our resource center, which includes a number of resources that will help you through your digital transformation, and you can access that for free using the QR code here or the links below. You can also reach out to me directly if you'd like to discuss your digital transformation and brainstorm ideas on how to improve where you're headed on your journey. Now let's jump back into today's content. So let's talk about the specifics of this particular implementation. I mentioned that Birmingham City Council is one of the largest city councils in Europe. I also mentioned that the organization had been using SAP for quite some time. In fact, they were using it for about 20 years from what I understand. And they were replacing the system, the SAP system, with Oracle Fusion. And this was a big deal at the time that they made that decision. And Larry Ellison even came out and publicly recognized what a big deal this was for Oracle to win against their fierce competitor in SAP. So this was a big deal that the city council was moving to Oracle. And they spent 120 million British pounds on this implementation after being told it would cost about 20 million. So big discrepancy in the amount of money that was invested in the project. And the worst part of all this is that at the end of the day, when they went live on the new system, they couldn't run their financials. They couldn't do audits. They couldn't do the basic things that they needed to do with the system. In fact, they're being told now, or they're estimating now, that it's going to take 3 to 4 more years after go live to be able to get to the point where they can automate some of the financials and some of the auditing functions. And to add insult to injury, the city council recently announced that they're going to have to spend about 15 million pounds this year to do a manual audit on the books. And that's 15 million British pounds that they didn't expect to spend because they thought their automated system would allow them to do this. So obviously, this is a big mess. This is what we all try to avoid. So the question becomes, what is it we can do differently? Why did they fail? And what can we do differently to avoid that failure? The first thing we have to look at here is the fact that this is a big shift from SAP to Oracle. In fact, this is more than just a system replacement. Anytime you have an incumbent system that's been used for a very long time, it's been customized, you've built the internal competencies and maturities around that system, anytime you rip that system out and go to replace it with a new one, that's a high-risk endeavor. It's very complex. It's going to take a lot of time and cost you a lot of money to do it. So if you think about it, most organizations build a large IT staff that learn a certain system. The users of the system, the employees, they know how to use that one system. But in this case, we went from SAP now to Oracle Fusion, and that's a totally different mindset shift. It's a cultural shift. Oracle's a bit more flexible, has more capabilities in some areas and less capabilities in other areas. So I'm not saying Oracle is right or wrong for Birmingham City Council, but it's just a massive shift to go from one incumbent system to another, especially if you're a larger organization, especially if you're a complex organization, and especially if you've been using your legacy system for decades or more. So those are the things you have to think about. And so if a vendor comes to you and says, hey, we can implement this new system to replace your old one in just 18 months or 24 months, if you're a large organization, I would look at that and say, that doesn't sound right, because we are not just changing our systems, we are completely overhauling our processes. We've got to train people on an entirely new system. We have to build an IT staff that can support this new system. So there's a lot that goes into that. So Recognizing that moving from one platform to another, especially if you're completely changing that platform and moving from one platform to a very different one, that's going to increase the cost, risk, and time associated with your project. Now, we also have to look at this concept of digital maturity. A more digitally mature organization that is used to modern technologies and has built a very innovative culture and a very robust IT staff internally, that organization is going to have a little bit easier time transitioning to a new system than an organization that is sort of rooted in an older technology and maybe just doesn't have that digital maturity or that sense of innovation or that culture of innovation within their organization. Now, I don't know Birmingham City Council. I've never worked with them. I've never worked for them, so I couldn't tell you what their culture is. But based on what I've read in public records related to this project, it sounds like they have a highly tenured staff. It sounds like they've been using the same systems and the same processes for a long time, which would tell me they probably have a fairly low digital maturity. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not judging them for that. A lot of organizations have low digital maturity. But what you have to recognize, when you have a low digital maturity, it's going to take you longer, it's going to be riskier and more costly for you to move to an entirely new system. So you just have to plan accordingly. I'm not saying that this project should have cost 120 million pounds, but it probably was never going to cost 20 million pounds no matter how well they manage the project, because they're a big, complex organization and their digital maturity is relatively low. So it's important to recognize what your digital maturity is and recognize the gap between where you are today and where you're going in the future. In fact, if you'd like to learn more about this concept of digital maturity, understanding what it is and how you can measure it in your organization, check out this video right here on my YouTube channel. I dive into that topic specifically in this video. One of the failure points that were recognized by audits of this project and people that had worked for Birmingham City Council in this project was that the project governance wasn't up to par. There wasn't enough project governance to ensure that the project was going to be successful and that the project was going to stay on track. Now, I don't know a lot of details of what that means or what the project governance was or wasn't, but it's interesting after the fact to hear an organization say we didn't have the right project governance and therefore we involved our CEO in the project, which is what happened here in this case. So I don't know if the project wasn't directly reporting to the CEO until later or not, but it sounds like it probably wasn't. And I'm not saying a CEO needs to be involved in every single detail of a project or even that a CEO should be the project manager or even the project sponsor, but the CEO and a leader of an organization should absolutely be heavily involved in any digital transformation project, especially one as complex and risky as this one. It sounds like that was a lesson they learned along the way and they got the CEO more involved later on after the project was already well off track, partially because they were getting so much public backlash being a public institution. But at the end of the day, they did make that adjustment. But it is a good reminder that you want to make sure you have solid project governance and sponsorship of the project at the executive level. One of the interesting nuances of this implementation is that the City Council moved from a highly customized version of SAP and they tried to move to a highly customized version of Oracle to replicate what they were doing in that highly customized version of SAP. So that's another risk point right there, is when we customize software, the more we customize software, the riskier it's going to be for our project. And the thing to note here is customization is a problem because not only does it cost you more, it increases risk in an implementation, but it also oftentimes masks a deeper problem, which is a lack of acceptance of how modern technology works. So in this case, I'm speculating here, but in this case, if the organization was used to the way SAP operated and they try to replicate that in Oracle and they weren't even open to the way that Oracle operated off the shelf, then they were going to probably customize the software more than they needed to. And that's a common phenomenon we see a lot with our clients that we work with, is that customization is a problem for a number of reasons, but oftentimes it's a symptom of a deeper issue, which is lack of organizational change management or lack of acceptance from a human perspective. So we really have to think about what we can do to avoid customization and ensure that we manage change effectively within our organization to avoid this type of failure. One of the other interesting things that I read about in this case is that not only was the cost escalating quickly as the project went on, it went again from 20 million British pounds to 113 million British pounds, but the expected business benefits and expected business value kept getting ratcheted down. So over time, as the implementation went on, they started adjusting the business case and setting expectations lower. And who knows whether or not that's because they just were underperforming, under-delivering in the project, and or if it's because the business case and the expected business benefits were never realistic to begin with. It's probably a combination of both if I were to base it on experience. But the key here is to recognize you need to have an accurate understanding of what your business case costs are. And just as importantly, maybe even more importantly, you want to have a very clear understanding of what the benefits are. And I'll add another dimension to this discussion too, which is a little bit outside the realm of business case, but it's very related to it. And that is to understand and quantify what the potential impact to your operations are if the project doesn't go well. So in other words, if you can't close the books, if you can't run payroll, if you can't ship product, if you can't take customer orders, what would that mean to your organization? How much would that cost you? Because oftentimes that puts things in perspective to help you make decisions of, well, do we want to spend that extra time to really thoroughly test the system, or do we want to invest a little bit extra in our change management, our training to ensure that we don't run into that problem? And it'll help your team understand and make educated decisions about the risk-reward trade-off. And again, that's usually not built into a lot of business cases, but we still have to think about the cost benefit of increasing time and cost on an implementation versus increasing the risk of operational disruption when we go live. So these are just a few of the lessons that I picked up from studying this case, and I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on that as well. So please drop in the comments what you think the biggest problem might have been with this city council, or if you've ever seen or been a part of an implementation failure or a troubled project. I'd love to hear your comments. What do you think the biggest root causes are, the biggest lessons are, and takeaways are from implementation failures? To learn more about how to avoid these sorts of challenges, I encourage you to read our free ebook that you can find on our website. It's called Lessons from 1,000 ERP Implementations. In this ebook, it'll provide my 20 lessons for what I found and our team has found to be the most important lessons from having helped over 1,000 organizations through their digital transformations. You can read that book by scanning the QR code right here, or you can go to the links below. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day. The first thing we have to do, so one of the interesting nuances is that one of the implementation failed so miserably, about winning this deal for Oracle. He's publicly lauded. God, oh my gosh. And Larry, gosh.